Ready writing is one of my favorite contests because it is the one contest for divergent thinkers. It's a contest for thinkers. It's a contest for students who are ready to write something and ready to think and talk about something. One of the analogies that I use with my own students is that of a bull rider. If you're a bull rider, then you hop on the bull. You don't have time to walk around the bull and analyze how you're going to ride the bull. You're on it, you've got 8 seconds, and you've got to hop off of it. That's the nature of the ready writing contest. Ready writing is really a conversation. And so when you're reading the prompts for ready writing, those prompts are rooted in a conversation. Think of the literary groups, such as the Lost Generation, the Knickerbockers, or the Revolutionaries, and pretend that you're sitting in a coffee shop and you're having a conversation about the latest topic with those intellectuals. That's the nature of the ready writing contest. The context for these conversations is going to be rooted in what people are interested in. Current events, historical events, all forms of literature, art. The content can span centuries. It can be about different decades. It can be about different disciplines. If you're interested in science, then you can pull from that field. Thinking of ideas is probably the most important step of the process for the ready writing essay, because what you put in your essay is going to determine your audience's response. I watched a documentary one time about how maple syrup is processed. And the most interesting detail of that documentary was that they took 40 gallons of maple sap from the maple tree in order to produce 1 gallon of maple syrup. Think of that analogy whenever you're thinking about what to put into your ready writing essay. If you simply write about the first things that pop into your head, then chances are you're just going to have sap in your essay. When what you're really after are the sweetest ideas, the most intriguing ideas. So whenever you are beginning to respond to the ready writing prompts, you want to generate as many ideas as you possibly can so that you can pick out your best. The ready writing prompts vary from the invitational prompts, invitational A and invitational B, to the district prompt, region, and state. You're going to notice that the prompts increase in length from the invitational prompts to the state prompts. The invitational prompts typically are 1 to 2 sentences long. The state prompts, however, are usually a full page, single-spaced. However, your approach to these prompts is not going to change. You're going to pick out the most important ideas of the prompts. You may be the kind of person who files your ideas in some corner of your brain. You may be the kind of person who likes to record your ideas and your thoughts on your phone. For my students, I have them keep their ideas, and some of them keep them in little notebooks, and we jot down quotes and people that we want to learn about. For some of us, we keep notebooks, and inside our notebook, we attend ready writing workshops. There's our Elements of Style book that we use to improve style. I'm not talking about style, but that's a good book to have. You can also collect example ready writing essays and prompts in a notebook. You may wonder why we have this ad in our notebook. This is actually an ad about how society handles beautification and objectification of women. So whenever you're writing your essay, it doesn't necessarily just have to be an example that you're pulling from literature or history. It could be anything that's a message. That includes visual messaging. Maybe you're an art person and you have a lot of knowledge about paintings. I had a ready writer who took AP Art History, and so many of her examples were from things that she learned in that particular class. There are 3 main steps in analyzing the prompt. Step number 1 is to read the prompt and make sure that you understand what the prompt is saying. Step number 2 is to analyze the prompt and consider how you want to respond to that prompt. And then the final step is to craft a thesis statement. Many students jump directly to step 3, which is crafting the thesis statement, and skip over steps 1 and 2. Don't do that. That means that you're skipping the thinking part, and this is a thinking contest. For step number 1, you want to read the prompt, and then you want to circle or underline the important words from the prompt. For example, this year's invitational A prompt is, "The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens." Topic number 2 was being different is critical. For topic number 1, you want to ask the questions, what do we mean when we say we measure a society? To measure a society. Measure means to gauge it. This quote by Jimmy Carter emphasizes social programs. When I'm thinking about this quote, I respond naturally with questions. Who are the most helpless and weakest members of society? Why was Jimmy Carter addressing this situation? What was going on during his time period that made him feel like it was necessary to talk about this? What are the foundational premises of a society? What keeps a society strong? All of these are questions that pop into my mind whenever I read this quote. I also think of the dichotomy of systems versus individuals. If we're talking about the weakest members of a society, then that makes me think, okay, who are the strongest members of a society? Who are the most powerful members of a society? Are they always pitted against the weakest members of a society? Or could the antithesis of this prompt also be true? For the Ready Writing Contest, the rules say that you use the prompt as a springboard. For the Ready Writing Contest, the rules say that you use the prompt as a springboard. The question always comes up in the grading room, how far can a student springboard from the prompt before it's too far? Well, whenever you're addressing that particular question, let's go back to our analogy of thinking about this prompt as a quote in a conversation among intellectuals in a coffee shop. If you are responding to this prompt in such a way where your response would be misunderstood by everyone who's a part of the conversation, then you've springboarded too far. You want your response to the prompt to be in context of what the quote is saying and what the quote is meaning. You can take the opposite approach. In other words, if you're having a conversation in a coffee shop, it's totally appropriate to disagree with someone. It's totally appropriate to disagree with the prompt. When I read this quote by Jimmy Carter, and I consider taking the opposite approach, the first book that pops into my mind is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It would be totally appropriate to talk about how societies become stronger whenever we encourage the development of individuals. Whenever I consider helpless and weak individuals of a society, I start with current events. Who might be in the news today that would fit in these groups? I might also consider how the state of Texas has cut funding for the mentally ill and programs that assist mentally ill individuals. I might also consider incarcerated individuals or minorities. But there again, we go back to that first step. Notice the important key words in the prompt. To whom is the prompt referring? What's the prompt saying about these people? That's what I want to consider first. Topic number 2 quote, being different is critical, was said by Anna Patricia Botín, who was born in 1960 and who is the chair of a banking institution. However, I wouldn't have known that information had I not looked that information up about her. I did see that she was born in 1960. So if I'm going to put this quote in context, then I want to consider when is being different critical. In what disciplines is being different critical. I might consider how being different in the field of art is critical. I might consider how being different in the field of education is critical, or financial institutions, or the field of technology. I want to root this quote in context, especially this quote, because it is so broad and it can be interpreted in so many different ways. As a student, whenever you see that word different, you might begin with what it means in your own life. What does it mean to be different among your friends or in the school setting? What does it mean to be different among your family? And then you might springboard out and think about what does it mean to be different in technology, in education, in the field of finance, in literature, in science. Throughout the centuries, there have been people who think differently, and we call these people the innovators, the creators, the movers and shakers and the outliers of the world. The dichotomy that comes to mind with the second quote is that of assimilation versus originality. If I want to take the opposite approach to this quote, then I might consider, is there a time when it is important to assimilate? Are there times when uniformity is important? The answer to that is yes. You will always have two prompts from which to choose. You want to choose, first of all, the one that you feel most passionately about. Which one resonates with you the most? If neither prompt resonates with you, sometimes that's going to happen. And in that case, what you want to do is choose the prompt that you feel like you could say the most about. It's a conversation. You may be passionate about what the quote is saying, or you may not. But that's okay, because you're a ready writer. And as long as you have something to say about the quote, then you can write the essay. I want to consider topic number 1. The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens. When I consider this prompt, I start asking questions about society and what we want to do to preserve a society. Our society is built on the foundational premises of justice and stability. In order for our society to be just and stable, then my next response is that every voice has to matter. In America, if we're going to have the type of society that we all chase and seek, then every voice needs to matter. The first thing that pops into my mind as a female is that women haven't always had a voice in the voting system. That's important because of the new documentation that may be required whenever I go to the polls to vote today. My grandmother didn't have a voice in the elections. I also consider minorities, and I consider children. Someone that pops into my mind that I think students would probably use as an example for an essay in response to this prompt is Rosa Parks. She's an obvious choice. Why? Because as an individual, she stood up for herself, and her actions voiced her desire to rebel against where she should have sat on the bus. That's a common example that I've read in many ready writing essays. Whenever you're thinking of ideas that you want to include in your essay, don't just think of the first thing that pops into your head. Let's go back to our analogy of having a conversation among intellectuals. We've all been in a class, and I've witnessed it many times as a teacher. During a class discussion, I've had a student who's only partially paying attention to the discussion, and they say something that's already been said by another student. Not only is that unoriginal, it creates a lull in the conversation, and everybody just wants the conversation and the discussion to move to the next step. Why? Because it's already been stated. Whenever you're writing about your examples and you're thinking of what you want to say in response to that prompt, don't say something that you think is going to be said by another individual. Let's go back to our Rosa Parks example. I want to say more than Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus. What people may not know about Rosa Parks is that she had already had a run-in with this bus driver. This wasn't her first time to show courage with this same bus driver. Something else people may not know about Rosa Parks is that she had been an activist. This wasn't Rosa Parks just going to her job as a normal citizen or as an everyday citizen. She was an activist. Her actions showed great perseverance and great courage, and this was her sitting at the front of the bus this one time that we know about. We know about it because the news picked it up. What we don't know about were all of those other times that she showed great courage. That may be a comment about how news media plays a part in whose voice gets heard in society. That's also in response and connected to this prompt. So when I'm generating ideas, remember I want to generate as many as possible, and then my next step is to begin connecting these ideas in order to formulate a thesis. That's my third and final step. How am I going to respond to this prompt in a cohesive thesis statement that I can develop into an essay? There are two types of thesis statements that I've seen in essays. One is an open thesis statement and the other is a closed thesis statement. The difference between the two types of thesis statements is that a closed thesis statement has the reasons listed. For a ready writing essay, I think most often an open thesis works best. An open thesis can be in the introduction, it can be in the conclusion, or it can be implied. I want to caution you against implied thesis statements because When you're writing the essay, it's very easy to write and think through what you want to say simultaneously, and then come to a conclusion at the very end of the essay. Your essay reads like a rambling in that case. If your essay lacks organization, then your reader's going to be confused. I tell my students, if I have to do all the work to figure out what they're trying to say, then that means they haven't worked hard enough at organizing their thoughts and thinking about how they want to present them. That is your responsibility. Writing the thesis statement is the first step of fulfilling your responsibility to your audience. Let's go back to the topic. The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens. I do agree with this prompt, because for a society to be stable and just, it must consider its most helpless members, simply because they cannot express their own voices, therefore their voices must be protected. If we have members of a society whose voice is not valued, then we do not have a stable and just society. The society will crumble. How do I want to formulate that into a thesis statement? I think I would say it like this. A just and stable society cannot exist if its weakest and most helpless members are not valued. That would be an example thesis statement response to the prompt. I'm giving reasons why in my thesis statement. I want to caution you against simply restating the prompt. I don't want to say something like, a society is measured through how it treats its weakest individuals. I'm simply restating what the prompt says in that case. The first thing that pops into my mind when I'm considering why a society, a just and stable society, needs to consider its most helpless members is that a just society must consider all voices. I also want to consider why women being a part of the voting process might mean more to other people in society than just women. That's obvious. Women voting in society was also important because women offered a maternal perspective on child labor laws. If I want to consider the voice of minorities, I might want to consider the Zoot Suit riots of the 1940s that took place in California. The way these riots were presented by news media stifled the voices of the Mexican Americans that were a part of the Zoot Suit riots. A current event that I might want to reference is the treatment of undocumented immigrants. If I want to make a comparison between how undocumented immigrants are treated in today's society with a historical example, then I might consider the Palmer raids of 1920, where immigrants were arrested without proper arrest warrants. These historical examples make me think about how we represent the voices. If we leave out voices in our history books, then that alters the perception of these groups.
Right now?
Can I go back and do it?
Yeah. Good. Just like I said.
You're so kind, Cody. Thank you.
No, this
Okay.
is easy. I have the easy job. Just make sure, give me a half beat pause. Like take a breath whenever you come back up. Give me a half breath. Because you're excited, so you're moving quickly. So
Yeah.
I don't want you to start talking and your head's still coming up, because then I can't.
Gotcha.
It's hard to
Okay.
edit that.